Sometimes you press record and you don't enter a title or do anything proper. You're just like, it's Saturday. What have I really done today? What have I done at all? I need to talk. It's not enough to just listen. That's the problem. You want to run away from doing anything, and then it meets you. Doing things meets up with you. And then you're kind of just forced into doing something. This is Benjamin Boyce, and welcome to my live stream on a Saturday evening. It is 5:22 p.m. on the west coast of the United States of America. Salvo Smith joins up with me first here. Hello, how you doing? I was going to read something into a microphone, but I needed a little extra elixir of attention in order to get myself going in a way. Hey, Jules. Julie, how you doing? Thomas, Zahn, My Views, good evening. Hey, Ben, Boyce Scouts. I was thinking we could call ourselves the Boyches. You guys mind if I call you that? Hey, Boyches. That would be fun. How are my levels? They look like they're peaking. I still haven't figured out exactly how to get this microphone to get going correctly. I was going to read a part of a novel, or I was going to read part of the Bible and just like slowly go through it for about an hour and see if I could figure out how to get my brain to work and my mouth to work as well. I'm looking like a snack, says Jane. I don't know what that means. Like a Scooby snack? Like what exact kind of snack is Benjamin looking like tonight? Actually, I wash my hair and sometimes it gets really frizzy, but today it really just kind of flopped down in this really waveform fashion. I don't know what's going on. I'm not a vain person, but I was thinking about spending like $70 to get some sort of like nightly regimen for my eyes because they're getting kind of puffy. But I don't know. I guess I think I'm 43. No, I'm 44. It loses all relevance after a certain age. It's like, who cares? So I'm 44. I look pretty young for 44, but sometimes those bags under my eyes get a little droopy. So I was just toying around with the idea of like doing some sort of like manly makeup regimen. Not makeup. It's not called makeup. I don't even know what it's called. Like a regimen of like skin health or something. There's these pomades and various lubricants that you can slather your face with and sleep on them. Or, you know what? But the problem with sleeping with lotion on my face is that I sleep face down. I always wake up on my back, but I cannot fall asleep unless I'm on my stomach. There's something about needing to like completely suppress my senses that like pushing myself like face first into a pillow in a long cushioned surface. Effects. It allows me to let go. But if I'm on my back, I can't fall asleep because I'm just too aware of the room. But I always wake up on my back. It's kind of weird. I never remember turning over. And then when I wake up at 2 or 3 or 4, because I usually do that, either by my own brain pinging awake, some sort of dream pings me awake, or my cat starts doing something. Little Bodie boy. I shut him out of the room. He's actually been allowed to go outside on his own. He sticks onto the porch. He's been very good. He stays on the porch and then he comes right back in when we call him. So I don't know if I should say that publicly. Are you allowed to let a cat outside? I guess it's still a free country while we have time. Oh God, somebody gave me a homework assignment. ER says 2 Kings 2:23-25. Let's go over. I have my Bible right here for some reason. Like it just kind of appeared on my, I didn't put it there. It kind of appeared there. It's like waking up on your back when you fall asleep on your stomach. Like the Bible just appeared over there. So I have to find the Kings. I can't remember oh, there we go. 2 Kings 23-25. Let's see what ER has to say. 2:23-25. What's in store for us? Is it a beheading? 2:23-25. This is from the New English Bible translation with Apocrypha. I love the Apocrypha. Love it. I just love having that there. just additions to the Bible. That blew my mind. I grew up Protestant, and like it wasn't until I was 18 or 19 that I realized that there were books in the Bible that weren't in the Bible. And you're like, whoa, this is the Word of God. There's stuff that they left out. Like, what's going on here, guys? I probably was actually younger than that, but like when I started grappling with esoterica, it really blew my mind. So these are the verses that I have been tasked with reading to you tonight. The people of the city said to Elisha, "You can see how pleasantly our city is situated, but the water is polluted and the country is troubled with miscarriages." Ouch. He said, "Fetch me a new bowl, and put some salt in it." Elisha says that. When they had fetched it, he went out to the spring, and throwing the salt into it, he said, "This is the word of the Lord. I purify this water, and shall cause no more death or miscarriage. The water has remained pure to this day in fulfillment of Elisha's word." This is leading up to the verses we are tasked with listening to tonight. He went up from there to Bethel and said, Bethel means the house of God. I know that. Elisha went up from there to Bethel, and as he was on his way, some small boys came out of the city, oh shit, this one, and said, "Get along with you, bald head, get along." He turned around and looked at them, and he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out of the wood and mauled 42 of them. From there he went to Mount Carmel and thence back to Samaria. Okay, this is really cool, actually, and I'm glad that I didn't do what I was told, and I read the verses before that, where we show this man, this prophet. He has this tool called the word of the Lord, and the word of the Lord basically makes that which is said true. I hope that I'm not blowing out. I'm going to turn down my mic just a little bit, and I will try to see, am I blowing out? Any audio files out there? Let me know if I'm blowing out. So what we see is this man, Elisha, and he has the ability to pronounce reality. He has the ability to use his intention to shape reality. And sometimes that intention of his serves for the betterment of others, and sometimes it serves for his own pride. So what we see is not that the word of the Lord is righteous in and of itself. The word of the Lord is lent unto a man, and the man dispenses with that power according to the parameters of that which is man. There's a lot. I was reading Job, and it's really interesting because you see these stories time after again of these righteous men. And the righteous men, that version of righteousness, I was just reading the first paragraph of Job, and it doesn't make any sense according to the way that we think of things. Let me read that just a sec. "There lived in the land of Uz," and this is the book of Job, "a man of blameless and upright life named Job." So this is a perfect man. This is an ideal man. "He feared God and set his face against wrongdoing. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 slaves." Oh, yeah. No, 500 asses and a large number of slaves. Thus Job was the greatest man in all of the East. So how can this man who's upright and who's blameless and fears God and sets his face against wrongdoing, how does he own a large number of slaves? Right? How does that even make sense to us in this time of purity right now? We're living in a time of Puritanism, whether you like it or not. And even those people who are against the woke we are all infused with that which is right. We're all battling for the right to declare what is right and what is wrong. And people go about doing that in different ways. So what is it to be on the right side of history? It's another way of having the word of God in your mouth. You say, I pronounce what reality is. My intention is backed up by the power of the Almighty. Now, the being on the right side of history is a form of the Almighty. At the end of time, as things will be written and looked back upon, I will be in the right. I am a part of the lineage of righteousness. But that righteousness, no matter how right you are, no matter how pure you are, is always fit within the human container. It's always fit into reality. So Elisha has this ability, he's given this ability to make reality as he sees fit. God is not in the word of God at that point. God is lending the word of God unto Elijah. And you see him go and bless a stream and purify it for people. And then when he's walking away, these kids piss him off and he kills them with a freaking ravenous bear. So it's interesting. I don't have any answers for you, but you see the psychology. You see an emergent psychology of the dynamics of something going on. When we are in prophet mode, let's say, we're not pure. Even when we are righteous and pure, we're still subject to outer disparity and inner imperfection. And then the cool thing about Jesus is he puts front and center, the Lord's Prayer. You always ask for forgiveness. You always reset yourself. You always try to reset yourself to a place where you don't know what's right, I guess. Some sort of divine centrism, right? Where you say, I don't really know. I come back and I ask, I open myself up to the possibility of discovering that which is right, which I think in the language of religion, it's really useful when you extrapolate having some sort of spiritual life, having some sort of, just basic prayer or basic belief in that which is almighty, right? Just having this sense and paying tithe to the sense that your powers as a human being are always going to be, you're going to be misconstruing what's actually going on outside of you and then making wrong decisions. And if you really want to, have the ability somehow, hopefully, or at least the hope of being right, you have to give up the idea of being right. If you want to participate in the process of becoming refined, let's pivot out of religious talk. I feel bad whenever I bring up religious talk. I don't know why yet, but I do, because I want an audience that I understand that there's an audience that can't stomach that stuff, and I want to make exception for that. But I put an opinion on the internet. It was a political opinion. I noticed that there was this one guy who looks like he's going to be president. Before he was voted in as president, some information came out about this guy's son, and it showed that this guy's son was, dealing in unrighteous behavior, very explicit unrighteous behavior, morally abhorrent behavior, and then morally abusive behavior. There was some sex and some drugs and some shady deals with foreign interests. Let's just say China, maybe Ukraine, whatever. But this guy who's going to be president, his son, it turned out that his son was involved in wrongdoing. And what the media did was completely suppress that. The media even kicked off other media from being able to share that. I'm still trying to see if my audio is okay. Right. So Hunter Biden, some story came out and Twitter kicked off the New York Post, and mainstream media just didn't talk about it at all. Like, it was just like, we're not going to talk about it. We want our guy to win, so we're not going to talk about this stuff. And then what I saw yesterday was that the son of the current president, his name is Donald Trump Jr., got coronavirus, and all of the media outlets were talking about it, and Twitter was promoting that. It was newsworthy. So that which is newsworthy is chosen by these people. And I just pointed out the fact that there seems to be, to me, a disparity in the ways in which things are being reported around here, right? I just kind of made a little thing with emojis, right? And somebody came after me. Actually, a couple people came after me because people, whenever you bring up this current president, Donald Trump, people get really incensed. If you're not against him, you're overlooking his sins. You're overlooking his unrighteousness. You're overlooking the fact that he is basically evil incarnate, right? Or that's the sense that I get. Now, I am overblowing people's case, but it seems to be the case that people come down harshly on you if you don't come down harshly on the current president. And somebody accused me of losing touch with objectivity. I thought it was interesting. I just made this observation that the media treats different people differently, even though you can kind of see that these two people are the sons of very powerful people, but we're going to suppress the story of one son and we're going to boost up the story of another son. right? I was making that statement. And then the person who accused me of losing contact with reality said that the positions of power of these two men are completely different. Ergo, the story would be completely different. And he came across to me as being very accusatory. And then I asked, well, why are you... What's your goal here? I tried to ask, what's your goal here? Why would you go into a conversation and accuse me outright of losing objectivity? Why would you make that first move, that accusation move? When, if you want me to refine my point of view, we could just enter into a question and answer period, or we could find some sort of mutual understanding. But since you started out with an accusation, you put me automatically in the defensive. And it was at this point, I'm going to tie it back to the Evergreen story. There's this moment in the hallway where Brett Weinstein is being surrounded by students, and he says something that's really geeky and really weird. And it never really set right with me. The students are... he asked the students if they want to know what reality is or not, or if you guys want to come to a mutual understanding. And he says explicitly, I'm misquoting him, but he says that I am not interested in debate. I'm interested in dialectic, where instead of us trying to figure out who's right, which one of us is right, arguing about which one of us is right, we both state our case and we come to a mutual understanding. And I finally kind of got that in the parameters of the ways in which I was entered into a dialogue with by being accused. By being accused in that dialogue, I was automatically having to test my ideas or defend my ideas with the risk of me being wrong. Now, I have no problem with being wrong, but I don't really find that much juice or that much entertainment in being proven wrong or into being forced into a position where I have to call somebody else right. I had an opinion. If I was in a dialogue where I was able to refine my position, that's more interesting to me. Now, bringing it back to the religious kind of way of looking at things. You know, the idea of righteousness and the idea of sin, the idea of being upright, the idea of fearing God, right? Of being aware that you could be wrong, but always trying to seek being in the right. That can be tested in two ways, where you see yourself as in a state of sin or state of righteousness, or you can see yourself as an evolving person in this dialogue of being continually refined. Refined in your thoughts, refined in your behavior, refined in your personality, refined in your talents. I think that the conception of a human being that is in a spiritual process of being refined, or in an intellectual process of being refined, or in a physical process of being refined is much more interesting to me than being proven right or wrong, or sinful or not sinful. Did you guys have lunch today? I've been bad with lunch. I had like a energy bar. Well, it wasn't even an energy bar. It was a breakfast bar, which is kind of like the predecessor of an energy bar, the breakfast bar. It's kind of like oats filled with some sort of jam. I actually have a song about a breakfast bar. I don't think I'll sing it. It's kind of boring. It goes, I am a breakfast bar. I come from near and far, from high and low, to tell you I can make you grow upon command. What don't you understand? I'm made of oats and bran, triple baked into a cake, then promptly rolled in cookie dough and sprayed with preservatives. I ask you now what gives. I came to you in total faith, but now I see you've decided crepes are much more to your liking now, but you'll look... But, oh wait, you're looking like a cow, tube-fed from day one. No ketchup, extra bun. And if you're on the run... It's really boring, right? It's about the War of the Horses, where what happens is that the vegans kind of weed out weeds, and the weeds get together and try to defeat the vegans because they don't want to stop existing. And the vegans are filled, instead of bloodlust, because they've suppressed all of their meat eating energies, they're filled with weed lust, and they only eat things that are grown in rows. They can't stand anything that grows outside of rows, so they try to destroy the weeds. They're filled with weed lust. The weeds get together. They contract this mad scientist called Dr. Other Such. They create this chocolate weed who causes the vegans to become pacifists again, right? Because the vegans smell the chocolate weed, and then they're filled with this glorious sensation of everything being okay. And the world turns into this great big couch with some sort of vinyl lining, or no, satin lining of some sort. They all lay down and leave the weeds alone to grow as they would. But however, the chocolate weed has this unintentional consequence of driving horses crazy, and then the horses go around and eat all the babies, and then there's no more humans left, except for this contingent up in the mountains. And so there's this whole like war of feeding the horses, and the breakfast bar and the chocolate weed kind of try to do this ad campaign to stay relevant in the eyes of the horses, because the horses need to keep on eating, and they can't just eat chocolate weed. So the commercial for the chocolate weed, the breakfast bar is where that song comes from. But it's not inherently interesting. It just goes over and over and over again. I do have a chocolate weed song. It's actually better, but it needs song. It goes, chocolate weed. It goes like this. You guys can leave this live stream at any time. We're not talking about the Bible anymore. We're talking about like a future dystopia. It goes like this. It goes, chocolate weed, if you feel the need for speed and you don't want to go to seed. Chocolate weed, chocolate weed, chocolate weed, chocolate weed. That's really an epic song. There's this great like breakdown when it goes heavy metal. Anyways, I'm feeling a little embarrassed. I didn't mean to start singing. I should just get all my kids' songs out and relearn them all, and then I can just like talk about something pseudo-religious or political. This is the thing. I'm kind of tired of talking about politics. I know I have to. I know I'm kind of contractually obligated to continue to discourse about reality as we know it. Within the political sphere, but I just felt this shift in the last couple of weeks. I'm like, I want to do something more substantial with my life than just talk about politics all the time. So how do I take my stuff and turn it into what the audience wants? So, I mean, we don't necessarily live in a fanarchy. You know, this is my idea that internet creators can like establish kind of this fan base that then directs them into what they create. And I call this the fanarchy. And I don't necessarily live in a fanarchy quite yet. I'm not actually captured by my audience just yet, but I do want to make some sort of inroads between what I would like to do, which I don't know what I would like to do, and what people want me to do. So I don't know that. And to that end, I'm going to read another super chat because somebody actually wants me to say this. Here's $5, says Bonkers Dave. You're a beautiful man, Bonkers Dave. I like that off-white background that you have, Bonkers Dave. I'm going to go watch cat videos now. See you later, Bonkers Dave. IDW clean room. That sounds... Is that where the IDW people go to die? Oh, the IDW. It's so annoying. I have to contend with this word IDW. I see people like dissing on the IDW. I'm like, are they talking about me? Are they talking about me or not? Am I being talked about right now? But nobody cares about me. Benjamin, do you go to church? I'm most interested in Orthodoxy. Was baptized there. Oh, really? I don't know what is holding me back from going back. That's interesting. There is some sort of church up the road that I think might be kind of Catholic adjacent. So I don't know exactly what it is. It seems kind of Catholic. I don't know if there's any Orthodox churches in Olympia. I was thinking about that. I've been watching or listening to Okay, listen, I'll just be completely honest with you. This massively multiplayer online race war simulator called World of Warcraft is coming out with a new expansion. And if you've been following me long enough, you'll know that about once a year, I spend 2 weeks playing this video game. So there's this new expansion for this massively multiplayer online race war simulator called World of Warcraft. And it's coming out, I think, next week. So I've been playing that and listening to videos. And I've been listening to Paul Vanderklay, who I have had on my channel several times. He's a Calvinist reverend or minister, and his job, at least on YouTube, is to talk about things that are kind of within my realm of interest, if not expertise. He doesn't talk about critical race theory. He does not talk about the woke, but he does spend a lot of time talking about and discoursing around meaning and symbolism. And he has this episode about this conversation between Jonathan Pajot and Carl Benjamin, otherwise known as Sargon of Akkad, right? I wanted to say Sargon of Akkad, but it's Akkad. And so Jonathan Pajot, who's a symbologist and an orthodoxy person, an Orthodox Christian, I guess, is that what you're supposed to call him? And Sargon, who's like this kind of post new atheist, meme maker, kind of anti-SJW, anti-woke guy that's going in a certain direction. Of course, most, if not everybody, knows who I'm talking about because he's like much more ascendant upon the YouTube taco sphere than I am. They have a conversation. Pajot and Sargon, or Carl Benjamin, have this conversation. And in this conversation, Carl Benjamin talks about why he doesn't want to go to church and what stops him from going to church. And Pajot talks about what church does for you. And then Paul Vanderklay talks about what Pajot is talking about the need that we have to go to church and what kind of that satisfies. And there's always one thing that they all will leave out. Even Vervaeke and Peterson's off the charts now. Well, I mean, he's off the conversation circuit right now, but Vervaeke and Pajot and Vanderklay and that nest of the so-called not IDW. Like there's this IDW that's out front and center with the Weinsteins, and you can say Sam Harris and Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan. You have those people up there, but then you have this like these meaning crisis guys who are really trying to like talk about symbolism, talk about church, talk about religiosity and how we can't get away from religion and how there's these patterns within life that constantly crop up and how there's these spiritual disciplines within life that you can access that will actually enrich your consciousness or enrich your sense of meaning. And they always get to this point. They always get to this edge, which is why I don't go to church, but I do have a spiritual practice that I have been practicing for 20 years. They get to this edge of talking about something. They go through all the reasons of why go to church. Okay, there's the social ways, and then there's like the sitting down and like going through a ritual and kind of getting out of your body and kind of have this meditative sense. There's like this somatic property of church. There's this communal property of church. And then there's this meaning property of church where you have this superstructure that you can fit yourself inside and that you can fit everything else inside, other people and the world and all of history. You know, you have this grand eschatology. You have all these structures. They always only talk about the human experience. They always only talk about the physical or the mental or the emotional human experience. And they always kind of point toward this soul. They kind of talk about this awareness or this consciousness. It's always off the map. They're always trying to point to the what's off the map. And like, I get really frustrated. Well, I don't get really frustrated with them, but I always kind of sigh or smile because they don't know. They want to be able to talk about what's off the screen, right? They want to talk about the relationship that you have with the divine or the divine energy or the unity of the world, right? There's all these different words for it, but unless you've tasted that current, you don't know what you're talking about. And unless you've tasted that current, you don't know that you can't even talk about it because there's no way that that current fits in the world or into words, right? So it's really interesting to like try to like go back into thinking about church, thinking about religion, thinking about, you know, all these different texts and these different esoteric, and this is the Bible right here, these esoteric meanings and these exoteric meanings and all this different stuff that's brought up. And you can talk about consciousness. You can talk about the way that the brain works, and you can talk and talk and talk and talk for all of eternity. But until you receive that which is life and that which is living, and then you realize and you stand before that presence, right? Let's just say that until you get to that point where you're experiencing that and where you're aligned with that, everything else becomes a scaffold that always interrupts you getting there. Does that make sense? Everything that you know, belief itself in that which you're seeking, will always interrupt that which you're seeking, which has to come from a place of complete surrender of all these different faculties of what you have. Let's go back to Job, right? Job was upright. Job was always facing in the right direction. Job feared God. Job was still a powerful man that was enmeshed in the morality of his time, which we find detestable. He had all these slaves, and he had all these asses, and he had all these horses, and all this chattel. And did he have more than one wife? No, he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. I guess he only had one wife, right? You go back to that, and you see that this man is enmeshed in the reality of his time, and he's doing the best that he can with what he has. And yet there will come a moment when all of that is tested. There'll come this accuser, the story of Job. Like there's that first, setup of like, we have this man, he's the best man that we know, he's got everything you ever wanted, and he's not a bad guy. He fears God, right? And then up in heaven somewhere, like all the angels come together, all the spirits come together, and then this one spirit, the accuser, some call him Satan, but the accuser says, okay, well, you look at this guy, he is pure in his circumstances, but you take him out of his circumstances and we'll see exactly what he's made out of. Until you lose all of that, until you lose all your faith, all your belief, all your belongings, all your somatic experiences and your symbology and all of that thoughts of meaning, until you lose all that, you don't know what you're talking about when you're trying to talk about that which all these people who want to talk about God are trying to talk about. So I love all that talk, and it actually helps me. It really does benefit my life. It really does help me with my anxiety, help me with the parameters of trying to figure out what I want to do, what I want to become, and how to be a good person. All that stuff's great. All of this meaning crisis stuff is great. All these maps of meaning and the rebel wisdom stuff, it's all fabulous and wonderful. And I recommend you guys go look up John Vervaeke. Go listen to Paul Vanderklay. Like once a month, just pick a video at random from these guys and listen to them. Absolutely. Listen to Peugeot, right? Listen to all that stuff. But they're always pointing to that which is out there. They're always pointing to that which you cannot actually experience until you let all that stuff go. And then, even then, there's no guarantee that you're going to experience that. Thus spake Benjathustra. IDW. I was going to go down to another super chat. Chocolate weed is what I need. I hope my audio is doing okay. It looks like I'm tearing. I even turned it down and it still looks like I'm tearing. But when I went back and I listened to the last one, it wasn't loud enough. So I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. Whoa, thank you. What's MX? I'm going to have to look that up. Super chat. Fake name. Are you a gamer too? Do you have a PS5? Are you going to get one? I'm playing WoW right now, so I don't need to worry about that kind of realm of gaming. Wow. Don't know how super chats work here, but I've been trying to articulate why veganism that is linked with wokeness to be insidious, not to put you back into the political well. That's really interesting. I mean, you talk about, okay, what are we really talking about? Why veganism that is linked with wokeness to be insidious. Well, I think it really goes back to this sense of Puritanism or puritanicalism, right? It's really, 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 really difficult to be a good person. And there is this sophomoric stage of being a good person where it's really important for you to go around and tell everybody else how they're not being a good person, right? When you go on that path of purifying yourself, of getting ready to know yourself or reach some sort of like power or authenticity. There's this sophomoric stage. The freshman stage is like, whoa, I'm going to do this thing, right? And you're like, I'm reading all these books. There's all this amazing stuff. And then the next stage is like, I'm better than everybody else because I am on the right path. Now, I think that there's a strain of that in wokeness. There's this sophomoric strain in wokeness that has an overrepresentation and therefore obscures the real danger of wokeness, which isn't just the little brats going around and telling you how to act. It's not necessarily cancel culture itself. It's the bureaucracies behind that adapt to those voices. That is the real problem. Anyways, so, but that also happens within any religious tradition. It also happens within diets a lot. There's something about diets. There's something about somebody modifying their diet and going against the prevalent wisdom or going against striking out into this better way of living that is inherent in the diet that really concentrates or can evoke a lot of puritanical behavior in people. That's a really interesting thing. I think if we go back to Jonathan Haidt's kind of moral foundations theory, and I know there's other people other than Haidt that are involved in that, but he talks about this in The Righteous Mind, where there is this one value set called purity and impurity. And in the beginning stages or like the secondary stages of really mastering or pursuing that, I think in any tradition, in any pursuit, we start to really be annoyed with everybody else who's not following our path. Right. So I think that veganism, one, it causes you to kind of like lose out on a lot of easy, cheap calories. So you're kind of in a bad mood anyways. So that might exacerbate it, but still you are going on some sort of pseudo or authentic spiritual path of becoming a pure, more real, more there person. And I think I'm repeating myself, but you end up getting annoyed with other people who are not following you. And you need to prove yourself to be correct by going out and calling out other people. And I think that is, for whatever reason, involved in certain dietary practices. Super chat, Surelios. I want to pronounce that kind of like Greekish, like Lois, Cyrillois. All right. Why do you think religious practices and anti-racism have so much in common? Many thanks, Benjamin, and thanks to you. I am doing a series. This is the thing. This is the thing. I know I can't not be political, but I'm really going to boost up and really heavily concentrate on the interviews. I think that the interviews are, I don't want to talk business with you guys, but I know that the interviews don't drive traffic, don't drive clicks, but over time, I think they do. Like people don't have an hour to, people don't have time to watch 2 hours of content a week. They want 15 minutes from me, 15 minutes from Math Christensen, maybe half an hour from Styx Hexenhammer, because that guy can talk like crazy and he produces half an hour of content a freaking day. Like people like that little smorgasbord of YouTube, and to plop down this hour-long feast in the middle of your smorgasbord, you're not going to come around and really engage with that stuff. But the cool thing about interviews is that I do connect with people and their audiences. So I had a woman on a couple days ago and I published it yesterday, Dr. Dina McMillan, and she talks about anti-racism. She talks about different ways of going about doing that. And she lays out this way where we can start to talk about biases. We can start talking about systemic racism in a way that's non-judgmental, that doesn't call into account individuals to fix this system, but just to become aware of what has happened historically to different races in this country or different ethnicities in this country. And there is a danger, I am aware, there's always a danger of degrading the conversation when we think in terms of sociological principles. When we think in terms of groups of people, we really denigrate the individuals that comprise those groups. And there will always be more difference between individuals within a group than between individuals in different groups. I don't know if I'm saying that right. There will always be more differences between men than between men and women, just because the way that there's so many different variables in play. So when we group all people into the white race, and we group all people into the black race, and then the Latino race, and then the Asian race, and then the Arab race. We always leave people out because we run out of letters in the acronym that we can remember. There's that thing. But we also degrade the individuals within those groups. But that is not to go to say that there hasn't been historical forces that have direly, drastically, and deeply affected different groups on average within this country. And just recognizing that is a step to amelioration, just recognizing that. And if you can own that conversation outside of critical race theory, outside of the manipulative practices within Robin DiAngelo and Ibram Kendi's totally crazy thinking, totally insane thinking, right? So one, it's not enough to just call out their thinking as bad, but you have to co-opt the good ideas that they're talking about. You actually have to take back the conception of systemic racism, of structural racism, of institutional racism, there's another one that I'm not remembering, but there's also interpersonal racism. There's these different things that they have, that they own, that we need to take back from them. So to just completely say that systemic racism doesn't exist is not honest, and it also allows them to have something in their pocket that they can shape according to their narrative. So the original question was about what is there between anti-racism and religious practices that have so much in common. That is a very deep, multifaceted question, but one way to really summarize that up is to say that as a social movement, it is non-secular, and therefore it feeds on parts of people and feeds upon groups that have banished religious thinking from them. So there is education. We have banned religious thinking as far as we could from education, right? That's a place that's supposed to be secular. Different sorts of, what's it called? Like government practices, different sorts of companies, different sorts of places where people congregate. We have tried to strain religious thinking out of there, right? But religious thinking is always active in the minds of human beings. Religious thinking, that which would be a way for people to kind of excise themselves out of material reality, go into a realm of pure belief and discourse with each other there, right? That is always active. We always want to go up there, right? And there's different ways to do that are religious, and there's different ways to do that are non-religious, like just talking about like the Simpsons universe. We're talking about the World of Warcraft, like you go to work, I'm just going to talk about the World of Warcraft with my friends. We all believe in all this stuff that doesn't really have an impact on it, but is really interacting with us in our imaginative frequencies. And there's certain things that the anti-racism stuff does, and it has to do with the way that it uses sociological principles to describe what's going on that really interacts with people's imagination. You are called upon to imagine what it's like to be a black person if you're white. You're called upon to imagine yourself, if you're a white person, as privileged. And therefore you start to use your imagination to project onto the world a certain sort of interpretation of the world. And you meet up with other people in the same interpretation of the world. And you kind of discourse on this imaginary supersensory level. Right? So it does take on, or it hijacks certain things that we're always doing. And the problem with it is that it's manipulative and abusive. And I was really fortunate to have Dina McMillan to start to lay out certain manipulative principles that are in that thing. So there's a lot of different ways to talk about how anti-racism is a new religion, and it's not a new idea. And there's plenty of people talking about it. John McWhorter has a book coming out in a few months, and I highly recommend James Lindsay. I know he turns a lot of people off on Twitter, but I really like the guy. He's got one of the best minds that I've interacted with. Just an insanely powerful mind that guy has. And sometimes it spills out in ways that people that really do turn people off. Sorry, James, to say that, but I'm saying that in a way to say that James Lindsay has done a lot of work on new discourses, and there's problems with new discourses too because of other things there. But he does a lot of work like laying out why this religious stuff or why this anti-racist, so-called anti-racist critical theory stuff and critical race theory stuff, colonial theory stuff, queer theory stuff, how it operates like a religion. Now, I don't know exactly what James has to say about what we're going to put in the place of religion, but what I have seen happen is that the religious capacity of human beings, which is part imagination and part sociological, or part a way for us to kind of rise above our mundane circumstances and meet in a field of imagination with a bunch of symbols where we kind of dance around certain idols, make meaning out of things, and then we go plop back down into our individual bodies. We plop back down into our normal mundane alienation, but we're refreshed through that process. That stuff, that is always going to be a capacity that I think we need to deal with, that we need to manage. And the critical race theory, etc., or however you want me to pronounce that, is feeding off of that kind of stuff. So you do have to confront that as it is and really say, okay, is it proper for us to have a religion that overlays our politics, that overlays or informs our business practices, that overlays or informs our law? And if we want that there, what is the content of that, and what will it end up creating out of our law, out of our businesses, out of our education systems? There's a lot of stuff to critique there and to unpack. This is Benjamin Boyce, and I still don't know if my audio levels are okay. ER, Super Chat, $5. Thank you, USD. ER, are you Jung at heart? Really quickly, there was, well, I've been diving into Jungian podcasts, but I feel like there's like this line in the sand where Jungians just keep on talking about the same thing. I'm like, okay, I want more. I want more than what Jungians have to offer. I really appreciate their insights, and I do think that they allow, through that analogy and that metaphorical conversation, which is more dramatic in import, they give people tools to create lore that informs their life by distilling different aspects of themselves into characters, into these archetypes. I think that there's a lot there, but I want more than that. So I think that we can think, I could go back and like principally interact just with Jung, because Jung as a thinker is really brilliant, really great. There's a lot there, and there's a lot to wrangle with. But Jungianism, I'm kind of like, I like a little bit of that every once in a while, but I always kind of feel like I'm wanting for something. There's something that, I want to translate that into something that's more than what it already is. I think it was a very novel, at least literary, evolution of storytelling, and of the storytelling that is subsequent to storytelling being interpretation. That was a great evolution of interpretive storytelling. But what's next? What's next? What's next? But that's not to denigrate Jung as a great thinker and as a very powerful and impactful individual. And his way of thinking has spawned 100 million conversations. So just on that alone, I deeply respect the fellow. Somebody said my name. Anyways, we're going on to Russ. Thank you guys for letting me ramble. Thanks for showing up. I hope my audio is A-okay. A loving heart is the truest wisdom. Charles Dickens. That's some wonderful words. You know what? I've been growing in fondness with dog picture people. There's these people on Twitter and these people like here right now on YouTube that have dog pictures, and most of them, they're all right people. And I want to say, Russ, you're an all right guy. Let's read that one more time. A loving heart is the truest wisdom. The coolest thing about these live chats is that people, my live chats, how many, there's 200 people here. I don't know. There's probably we're like 10 or 20 people interacting, but you go to these bigger channel live chats and there's just so many words that you can't really have a conversation. So I like this kind of speakeasy. We're at this point where there's enough people involved in this to have a good sampling of eyes and ears and thought thinkers. And there's few enough people for people to have chats in the chat. area. Luke. Hey, Benjamin. I really appreciate your work and your thoughtful questions to your guests. What activities do you get up to that ground you or that you really enjoy outside of politics identity? I guess I already talked about the video game thing, which is nice, but I don't play video games for the video games. I play video games to listen to podcasts. I probably should be running instead of playing video games to listen to podcasts, but or videos or just long form videos and stuff. I do have a cat, and Bodhi creates a lot of meaning in my life. And I do have a cooking practice. And cooking is something that brings me meaning. I actually, I probably should really redesign my life. I kind of been like in this create things for YouTube as much as possible thing for about 3 years now. And I kind of like want to reorganize my life around some sort of discipline. So I want to get back into writing. I have 7 books that I need to go through and edit and tie all together. This one is the last one. This is the end. This is a really sad one. I was going to read some of it today, but it's really sad. And it's not pornographic, but it's about a guy who's like kind of his body is dissolving, and the last thing that like he holds on to is his sexuality. So it's rather an explicit book, which is unfortunate because that's something that you don't want to just read out loud, but I think it's well composed. It's really interesting. I was noticing about this particular book, this is about the undeath of the author. So the author creates this whole world, and then he kind of uploads himself into the world because he doesn't want to deal with reality anymore. Reality is really disappointing. He wants to be in a world of perpetual invention and just with his dreams. He just wants to be with his dreams. And it's about him like kind of piece by piece untying himself or unmooring his willfulness from reality. And the way that he does that is, through becoming undead. He becomes basically the guy who makes footnotes, the guy who can only interpret. He becomes a parasite on his own inventions, basically. So the undeath of the author, which is kind of a play on the death of the author, which is about the unmooring of any given text from the intention that created it. The undeath of the author is that the author is now going to hide within his world and always kind of be a presence that's correcting the world or that is exerting influence on any given interpretation. He's kind of one-upping the postmodernists by being a metamodernist in a way. I don't really trust the whole metamodernist movement per se, because every time I talk to them, they just kind of not make sense in a way. But that's what I wanted to say about this book. I wrote this in 2015. I was kind of in a crisis mode right now. The first version of this I wrote in 2007, and I was in a crisis mode then. I was in a loss of faith. I was in this crisis of faith about reality, about will, about love, about I guess sex too. I was just kind of going through this death. I think that people need to die more often. Like really take seriously those phases in your life where you don't believe in anything anymore, and really take them seriously and not run away from them, but really embody them. Really just kind of accept that process of life, which is death. Like a tree dies however many times a tree of years that the tree is living. If a tree is 100 years old, it's died that many times. It goes through a stage of shedding its belief in everything, of shedding its connection to the sun, right? It dies in its articulation of love of life. All of that falls away, and it becomes nothing but a skeletal replica of everything that's most hard and most slow and most steady about itself, which is not a good feeling. A tree doesn't enjoy fall. Are you fucking kidding me? A tree enjoys spring, right? Where it gets to just come for a month or so. Like that's what a tree enjoys. So I really think that we as human beings, we go through those phases too. We go through those passages of letting go, those passages of really finding our relationships, going through a state of not being filled with love anymore, of not being filled with invention and discovery anymore. And we tend to hide that stuff with good reason, right? We don't want to let our lover know that we don't love them right now, right? We have to enter into some sort of, some sort of open lie with that person, some sort of trust that they know that we're going through a phase right now. But just because we don't necessarily articulate that to other people, we do need to have some sort of inner practice or some sort of inner interiority, let's say, where we just really embrace ourselves as that which is dead, as that which is just the skeleton of life, that which is in a refractory phase of the spirit, right? And that's kind of what this book is. And I've gone through that twice now, and I probably should wait until I go through that again. Who knows when that's going to happen to really finish this up. But what I wanted to say on a literary level is that this book is really interesting in the way that it's composed, where it always almost makes sense. Like it's always really open-ended. There's something in the sentence structure of this book, and someday I'll read a passage from this where I think it was really subconscious. I was going through this today and figuring out what to do with it. And it's like you feel this guy like really shedding even meaning. How do you embody that in text? It's really a frustrating read because the sentences are always grasping after sense, but they don't just give you a tight little story. It's never tight. It's really, really frustrating. And the way that I get away with making really frustrating books is to make a whole lot of them. That's my strategy. I make 7 really, really frustrating books that kind of taunt you the whole time. I didn't give you an answer, but there's always nuggets in there. There's these great phrases, or there's this really sonorous sound, or there's a lot of music embedded in it. There's a lot of confession embedded in it where you're like, is this guy telling a story, or is he really showing me just how raw his own life is? He's saying things that you shouldn't say. There's always that. There's always that implicit threat of the truth, right? Inside of all of the lies that fiction is comprised of. I'm not necessarily selling myself so much as trying to describe a process of becoming a self and then wrapping that up in ambiguity. Rhythm is very important. If you guys ever want to make sense and you don't trust yourself, listen to rhythm. If you ever want to make sense, but you don't know if you trust your intelligence, really trust your ear. And you could read that as the pursuit of sounding smart, and that's not what I mean. I'm not talking about the facsimile or the semblance of being smart or intelligent or impressive. I'm not talking about being impressive. That's the domain of pretension. But there is a domain of pretense where you are playing, where you're reaching out, where you're trying to grapple your way toward understanding. Really, really trust your sense of sound. Not the sound of what other people will hear, but the sound of delight or the sound of something fitting together. Like really hone your ear to that. And I'm not saying don't go out and read and think and try to discover things in a very linear way or by really researching, doing your research. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying do that. But when you want to like reach out, trust your ear. It feels like our time's not up, but I have to go. So I'm going to go through, and I think there's 1 or 2 more super chats, but I got to go. It got later, or it's earlier than time to finish. Being Raised Mormon says Suriliwas. Hopefully I'll pronounce that eventually correctly. Being Raised Mormon, but having fallen out of it, I found Dina very insightful. Insightful, you spelled that interestingly. When she said being an outsider allows a more objective view. You said insightful, but I love the wordplay here with the insight. I'm gonna try to make that bigger so everybody can see this little either mistake or very beautiful accent. Happy accidents. Insightful. Being an outsider, you know, I've been thinking about that too. Like that line really stood out for me when I went back and I edited that. I had to edit it to kind of constrain it a little bit, but I was thinking about being an outsider. And I was thinking about, somebody asked me about why I went through Evergreen and I didn't get on the bandwagon. And there was something about being an outsider that I lean into that protects me, but also ends up deserting me. I end up deserting myself because I'm too much of an outsider. I don't trust even my own sense of community. So there's that, so being on the outside, being somebody who's unknown, being irrelevant is a superpower in our day. Being gifted with the ability to communicate, but not so gifted that people pay too much attention to you, is a really interesting place to be. But there's also really a necessity to have a community and to find people that you can resonate with and that you can be vulnerable to. That's very important for the development and the nourishment of the soul. And that's something that I worry about. I think Jim Carrey talked about that. So I didn't memorize his quote, but he talked about the danger of being alone, the danger of falling in love with silence and being solitary, because I think you do degrade. And that's why that was actually the impulse that caused me to start recording this live stream. I'm like, I've been listening and I haven't been producing. I need to talk. I need to be real. I have to go. There's a couple more super chats. I have to go. Could you say something about the particular myths that have informed your thinking in creative endeavors? There's this man called Pak Sumu Hadiwa Jojo, and he talks about the two sons of Adam. He talks about the son of Adam who was called Anwas and the son of Adam called Anwar. And actually, if you go on Amazon and you look up Benjamin Boyce and you type in the word Anwas, Anwas, you'll see my only published novel, which is an impossible read. It's a very frustrating book. That's the only one I have out there. It's very, very frustrating. It's really hidden. I always hide myself because I don't want to be close to people. I don't want to be known. I have to fix that about myself. But the story of the son of Adam, the two sons of Adam, Anwar and Anwas, it really had an impact on me. You have the outsider. Anwas was the outsider. So Adam and Anwar both followed the law of God. And the law of God is very simple. It's very, very simple. Be good. Do good by what is given to you. Really pay back life for life. You were given a life by a woman, therefore find a woman and give her life and then raise those children, right? Really participate in life as it is given. And find work in the world and do the job that is there. Develop something that's useful for other people. Like it's very simple. Like living a good life is very intuitive. The law of God is not some sort of counterintuitive thing. Right. The most of the difficulties in consciousness actually come from consciousness or from our mismanagement of consciousness. So there's that path of life. The only problem with that path of life is this. It's incredibly predictable. And so you kind of want to rebel against it. You're like, okay, so I fall in love and then I have babies and then I just raise them. Like, that's it. Like, that is really freaking boring. There's got to be more. And so one of the most impactful myths for me in my life is this story that's told by Pak Sumu Hadiwa Jojo about this other son of Adam called Anwas. And Anwas looked at life, and he looked at life as it is given, and he said, why can't I become a god? Why can't I become the master of reality? Why do I have to follow in the footsteps of the pattern that created me? Why not create my own pattern? How do I go about creating my own pattern? And the process of going about and creating your own pattern one that does not violate, nor is anti-life, but is unique in and of itself. Laying out that myth, right? That myth was very impactful for me because it was a writing prompt to figure out how would you go about creating your own reality? Like really doing that, not just saying all of a sudden, most stories do this. And this is why I refuse to be a writer ultimately, and why I force all of my readers to really hate me ultimately. It's to really ask the question, instead of saying, once upon a time, there's this magical fortress where you could learn how to create reality, right? Which is Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter, you don't have to learn how the spells work. And even if you look at the text of Harry Potter and you're critical about it, not about her issues about what it is to be a woman, but just look at how the reality of Harry Potter is created. It's created out of thin air. It's like, this spell does this thing. How does it do it? Don't ask any questions. There's no actual like sediment behind or backing up that magic, right? It's kind of like internally consistent if you kind of blink and wince, right? And it always only serves the hero's journey. That is the way to live the story of life. If you want to be a writer, you just figure out what people pay attention to you and you mimic that. It's really easy to be a writer. You sit your ass in a chair and you tell people good stories. And the good stories, they're always there and they're perennial. You don't have to worry about copying them. You're either good at, and you catch attention, or you don't. But the myth that really influenced me is Anwas. Anwas is like, no, it's not enough to just dream up a reality or to follow people's attention. I have to reprogram people from the ground up. I need to get down into the roots of sense. I want to deal with the assembly language of consciousness. Now my cat's telling me to go. Now I have two entities telling me to leave. So sorry, I had to go close the door. So anyways, I was on a rant and I lost it. I think I give enough though. So if you guys want to like be really frustrated with me, go and buy my book. It's on Amazon. It's like $5. It's really frustrating. Even my language is like dealing with the roots of sense. Like every line of that, you have to like recode and decode. And I'm not proud of that. It's just what I had to do in order to know that I was doing something of my own. And we go back to, I guess we go back to Job. I guess we go back to Elijah. Yeah, let's end on Elijah. Elijah, imagine having the power of the word of God, where you go up to a city and they have dirty water and you say, okay, this salt is the word of God and it's going to purify that stream, right? Imagine having that power. And then you're walking back and you're like, well, I have to go deal with this other problem. And these kids come out of nowhere and they call you nasty names. And you're like, screw you, kids. And just saying that, right? Without even thinking, just say, screw you, kids. All of a sudden, the word of God listens to you and creates this bear and kills and destroys everything, destroys and creates reality. That burden of being outside, of being objective, of being the outsider of the group, and then figuring out how that group operates, it's terribly lonely. It's always alienating you. Having the power of understanding how people think causes you to no longer think like a human. Really. Having the ability of understanding how stories operates casts you out of the garden of being a good storyteller. It makes you a terrible, terrible storyteller to be able to interpret things and to be able to understand how interpretations are never quite reaching the mark. That you're always on the outside. You're always on the outside. And that myth of the outsider was cast by Pak Sumohadi Wijojo, who's this Indonesian guy. He's a wonderful guy, one of the best people to ever live. I'm very, very certain about that. That story of the outsider is like, it was always like a writing prompt to me. Right? It's like that when I first heard that story in 2000 and probably 1999, I read that story in one of his talks. I'm like, that is the myth. That is the ultimate myth. How do you tell the story of the men who created reality? The only way to do that is to understand how reality is created and not violate it, but do it uniquely, not become somebody who is against reality, because that ties you to reality. You have to go through, understand reality, and then build it from the ground up. It's like it's like self-damnation. I find it wonderfully ironic. Let's go back to the super chats, and I really have to go. Hello, and loud. Meow. Just wanted to get your current opinion on the culture driven by stimuli and empathy taking the place of classic forms of faith. As I mature, here's this really interesting. This is gloomy. As I mature, it becomes clear discipline is freedom. That's the whole thing. It really takes maturity. So in my interview with Dina McMillan, and when you guys have time, please listen to that. She had some really amazing things to say. She keeps on coming back to our maturity, our higher functioning don't develop until later in life. It really takes maturity to stand apart from sense, to not be driven by stimuli, to really understand that freedom from stimuli is ultimate freedom. And that requires discipline. And I guess that's what I'm talking about. Like Anwas, the way that the story of Anwas is talked about in the stories of Pak Sumu Haru Jojo, he really concentrates on the way that Anwas gained power over reality was to gain power over himself. And that gaining power over himself was actually self-suffering. It was actually torture of himself. He fasted from food. He fasted from lovemaking. He fasted from sunlight. He fasted from breathing. He fasted from water. He fasted and fasted and fasted. He destroyed himself to create himself. And that's the outer limit of discipline. Right? You don't want to go so far away from discipline that you no longer enjoy a good cup of wine. You no longer enjoy a buttery croissant. Right? You don't want to go so far into your purity that you forget about butter, right? Every vegan needs a little butter. That pleasure keeps you grounded, right? It keeps you tied to pleasure. So we need to gain enough distance from pleasure to understand that we are no longer ruled by it, but not so much distance from pleasure that we no longer are pleased by life, because that defeats the process of life. It's another thing. I guess that's rather pedestrian. Oh, there's a word that I forgot to use. There was a word that I wanted to use, that a bromide. There's words for these really kind of lame statements. It's not cliche. I'll have to remember it and say it again. I hope my audio levels have been going okay. But again, it really is kind of backing away, but then realizing that you're backing away too far. Like, you can't go so far into objectivity that you forget that human beings are created out of the subjective. You can't denigrate lived experience in your pursuit of, putting down those people who abuse that. You really need to understand and co-opt lived experience, understand lived experience, speak to lived experience if you want people to not abuse lived experience for some sort of ideological purpose. I'm going on too long. Okay, even Telvito is giving me the thumbs off. All right, I'm going to go. I'm going to read a couple more super chats. Cyberplayer 5. I like your new cat. He just takes over when he is on camera. He is pretty powerful force. Someday I'm going to have to get somebody to edit my chats. Anyways, I think everything's fine. Okay, this is all I wanted to know. This is just an audio test. Audio is 5x5, which I guess is dimensions or some sort of rating. But I really have to go and cook dinner. You guys have a great evening. Be cool, calm, and collected. And I'll talk to you at some other point in the world. Goodbye.